The Moore Show is supported by Mindscape, Paranormal and UFO Matrix magazines. Available for download on all major digital platforms.
If you like what you watch, then don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates on The Moore Show. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new weekly television and radio shows.
The Moore Show is in partnership with Ozark Mountain Publishing, taking readers beyond the unexplained. The comments and views expressed on The Moore Show are those of the people that make them and do not necessarily reflect the view of Kevin Moore, The Moore Show, or this radio station and its affiliate or sponsors. This show is for entertainment purposes only.
Broadcasting from the UK and across the world on TV, radio and online. I bid you all good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be in all the world's time zones. This is The Moore Show, and I'm your host, Kevin Moore. For the next hour, I'll be covering subjects that will open up your mind and provide you with information you may have never heard before. On today's show, I'm joined with Neale Donald Walsch. Now, Neale is a modern-day spiritual messenger, and his words continue to touch the world in profound ways. Now, in the early 1990s, Neale suffered a series of crushing blows, a fire that destroyed all his belongings, the breakup of his marriage, and a car accident that left him with a broken neck. Now, once recovered but alone and unemployed, Neale was forced to live in a tent in Jackson's Hot Springs, just outside Ashland, Oregon, collecting and recycling aluminium cans just in order to eat. Now, at the time, Neale thought his life had come to an end. Despondent, he began writings which led to his trilogy of books, Conversations with God. His first book in this series was published in 1995 and became an international bestseller. It remained on the New York Times bestseller list for 135 weeks. 6 of his other books have made the Times list in the years since. He has published 28 books and his works have been translated into 37 languages. Neale Donald Walsch, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Now, Neale, let's get straight into the interview. In your opinion, what does God want?
From the beginning of time, human beings have imagined the entity that we call God, Yahweh, Jehovah, Brahman, Allah, by whatever name it pleases us to refer to that ineffable essence of the divine. From the beginning, we have imagined a God who somehow needs something, who is somehow incomplete, or who somehow can be upset, or annoyed, or unhappy, or disappointed, or frustrated, because it does not have everything it needs to be other than frustrated, other than unhappy, to be in fact full of joy, and totally happy and totally complete. So from the beginning, humanity has imagined a God who is somehow, at some level, incomplete and needs something in order to feel better about how things are going, about life, about itself, about all of it. And we have further imagined that not only does God need certain things in order to be happy, but that God needs them from us, that we are in fact the prime source of these things that God needs in order to be happy, and that if we don't give God these things that God needs in order to be happy, that we're going to have to be punished for it, because God is going to be very unhappy, and an unhappy God is not a good thing. So we have this whole construction, a whole theological construction that says, first of all, God needs. Secondly, God needs from us. And thirdly, if God doesn't get what God needs, God is going to be angry with us, going to judge us, going to condemn us, and going to punish us. The whole construction is based on an enormous fallacy. And the fallacy is that God is somehow other than all of it. That is, that God is less than the all. Even though all religions say, interestingly enough, most of the world's great religions agree on at least one point, that God is the all in all. That is, the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, the up and the down of it, the left and the right of it, the here and the there of it, the before and the after of it. Male and female created he them. God is all of everything, and there is no thing that is not God. Most religions tell us that in some form or another. Nevertheless, having made that assertion, most religions immediately jump to a second level that says, even though God is all of it, there is part of it that God apparently is not, because God needs to get it from us. So the fallacy is that God is incomplete in some way, or that God yearns for this nebulous thing called justice, or balance in the universe, or some kind of a condition that God needs to experience in order to be content and happy and not upset. And so if things are out of balance somehow, God then requires us to put them back in balance through our behaviors. We need to obey the so-called Ten Commandments, or whatever other instructions the various religions of the earth presume to be giving us from the mind of God. Now here's the truth, as I understand it. God needs and wants nothing, for a very simple reason. Because God is the all in all, in fact, that there is nothing else but God. God is all there is. All things are one thing. There is only one thing, and all things are part of the one thing there is. And since there is only one thing, it is impossible for that one thing to need or want anything else, because there is nothing else other than the one thing. And therefore, God is sufficient unto itself. The one thing is sufficient unto itself. It needs nothing else, because there is nothing else to need. This simple, fundamental, basic, and extraordinarily revolutionary understanding of the thing we call God would change humanity's experience dramatically, revolutionarily. It would be an extraordinary turnabout in our understanding of every aspect of life. Not only who and what God is, but who and what we are. For here comes the final element of that experience. If in fact God is all of it, and there is nothing that is not God, that means that we are also God, that we are also divine, that we are an aspect of that which is, of God itself. So if God were to imagine that it needed something from us, it would have to somehow convince itself that it and us were separate, that it was not us and we were not it. However, such an imagining is outside of the experience of God. And in the days and weeks, months and years ahead, it will also be outside of the experience of human beings. For humanity is finally, at long last, coming to the awareness and the understanding that everything I've just told you is exactly how it is. Therefore, the short answer to your question, what does God want? Nothing.
Right, so let's look at happiness. I mean, in your opinion, Neale, what is the balance for happiness?
I think there's a great misunderstanding. I observe that there is an enormous lack of comprehension on the part of most people with regard to what happiness is, what creates happiness, what produces happiness, and how happiness is experienced. For one thing, there's a thought that happiness and sadness are mutually exclusive. That is, that one cannot be sad and happy at the same time. So we have created a construction in the mental hallways of humanity's mind that says we have to step away from sadness, make sure we don't have any sadness in our life, do whatever we can to avoid sadness, in order to embrace happiness. That is a deeply misplaced awareness. It's an understanding that is not accurate. Happiness is not the absence of sadness. It's not the absence of negativity. It's not the absence really of anything. In fact, it's just the opposite. It's the flip side of what we think that it is. Happiness is not the absence of anything negative or sad or bad or not okay. Happiness is in fact the presence of all of it and the acceptance of all of it just the way it is. Happiness, therefore, is a state of mind that allows us to experience that we are none of the things we imagine that we need in order to be happy. That we don't need any of the things that we imagine we need in order to be happy. It's a state of mind that produces a self-identity other than the way we have imagined ourselves to be. Happiness is an awareness of who I am in truth. It's an awareness of what I'm doing here, that is on the earth, why I'm in this body, what is my relationship to all the rest of life, what is my true relationship to that part of life that some of us call God. Happiness is, I want to say, a state of divine awareness. And many of us achieve this state from time to time. Of course, we've all had moments of happiness, sometimes long periods of happiness, but it has become difficult for people to sustain happiness over an extended period of time because people get caught up in their illusions about what is needed as opposed to simply what is desired in the process called life. When we understand that we truly need nothing more than what is right here, right now, in order to be perfectly happy, then we've discovered what all the masters who have walked this planet have known from the beginning of time. And by the way, that includes experiences that may not on the surface seem to be, I want to say, happiness producing. The great gurus, the great masters, the great teachers of all time have somehow found a secret that has allowed them, even in the midst of what you and I would call the worst of outside exterior circumstances, found a way to maintain inner peace, inner joy, and even inner happiness, even, I might say, at the moment of their own death. Sometimes they forget, for a moment or two, for a second here or there, they may simply forget what they understand and know to be ultimately true. All the great masters have had those kinds of moments. But mastery, and I want to say happiness, is measured by how rapidly we move back into the ultimate awareness and the grandest reality when we step away from it now and then by misunderstanding what's actually going on in this present moment or who, in fact, we really are. When we understand who we really are, and by the way, who we are is an outpicturing of divinity, an individuation of God, an aspect of the essence of life that is all there is. When we understand and identify personally with who we really are, we move into a place that goes beyond happiness, a place that I would call bliss, the place of pure expression of the divine self. So you ask a question, what is happiness? Happiness is not the absence of anything. It's the awareness of everything, the acceptance of everything, not the elimination of bad stuff from our life, but the embracing of all the stuff of life and calling it all good. I have a son who has that as his favorite statement. No matter what goes on in his life, he says, it's all good. It's all good. It's amazing what it does to shift his in-the-moment experience of what's going on around him. He manages to slough off what other people bump into. He manages to push away what other people experience as obstacles in the way of their happiness. A wonderful teacher named Mary O'Malley says, what's in the way is the way. Understanding that is the path to happiness.
Yeah. And what does oneness mean to you, Neale? And what could oneness mean to other people?
I think that oneness is an inner knowing, an inner embracing, an inward adoption of an outward reality, a state of mind that we, in fact, move into, that allows us to express and to experience that there is nothing other than us anywhere in existence, that we are intrinsically a part of all of it, of everything, every other person, and every other thing that we might see around us. Yes, the trees, the stars, the galaxies, the birds, the all of life. Many people experience this in their lives momentarily. I've talked to people who have had an experience of oneness in meditation. For instance, I've talked to people who've had flashes of oneness, instances of this awareness, like a blinding flash, walking down the street, sitting in the park, maybe standing in the shower, who knows, but somewhere or another they just have a moment and they blink their eyes and they realize, oh my gosh, there's nothing but me. And then it goes away because we objectify through our consciousness of separation the things that we're looking at, rather than unifying with the things that we're looking at and realize that everything is made up of the same stuff and we are the stuff of which everything is made. I'd like to say that again. We are the stuff of which everything is made. There's nothing of which we are made that is not present in everything else that is in some measure. Carl Sagan had an extraordinary observation to make when they brought back some rocks from the moon. He said, isn't it interesting that the rocks from the moon that they brought back from outer space contain the exact chemical elements that you will find in that tree over there and in this person over here. Isn't it interesting that it's merely a matter of proportion, how things are combined to create particular formulations, particular formations of life? If we can agree that the words life and God are interchangeable, and in my cosmology they are, then we would say that life is constantly forming itself, or if you wish, God is constantly forming itself into different shapes and expressions and sizes, that life emerges as life through the process of life itself. So we are, in fact, gods in formation, or if you will, God's information. And I think oneness is the experience of not merely knowing that intellectually, not even embracing it emotionally, but expressing it experientially. We often move through such an expression when we're making love with our beloved. And at other moments as well that may not necessarily be physically or sexually oriented, petting a cat, hugging a dog, caressing a baby, smelling a flower, or in fact, looking at the night sky. Is there a single person, at least once in their life, who has not found themselves on their back, looking at the night sky and realizing, if only for an instant, it's all a part of all that is, and so am I? Who has not shed a tear in moments like that? What is oneness? Oneness is the moment that you shed a tear from knowing the truth.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Neale. Now, to define God, it's a very complex issue for myself. Can we interchange the words God with the word life, for example, or the word universe?
Kevin, let's go back to the beginning. To define God is really very simple. It's really very easy. People ask me all the time, Neale, what is your definition of God? Tell us what God is. And I say to them, actually, it's far easier for me to tell you what God is not than to tell you what God is. In order for me to tell you what God is, in order for me to define God, I would need the rest of all time, actually, the remainder of eternity, because that is how many things that God is, and that is how long it would take for me to describe what God is. But I can describe what God is not in about 1/10 of a second. Here's what God is not. Nothing. So there's nothing that God is not, which makes God quite easy to define. God is the all in all, the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. Even as organized religions have said, God is the unmoved mover, that which is. So it's not too difficult to define God. And because God is the all in all, everything that is, in fact, words, in fact, could be interchangeable with the word God. The words that I like to interchange with the word God most frequently are love. That's, I guess, a little bit predictable. God is love. God is also freedom. God is wisdom, compassion, knowledge, joy, and my favorite word of all, us. God is us. So, yeah, we can interchange words for the word God, as I understand it, and I frequently do.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break now, so stay tuned. We'll be right back.
The Moore Show is supported by Mindscape, Paranormal and UFO Matrix magazines. Available for download on all major digital platforms.
Visit themoreshow.co.uk/shop to purchase products and services from your favourite past guests. If you're new to this site, you can also catch up on the previous television and radio shows through YouTube and the Moore Show website.
The Moore Show is in partnership with Ozark Mountain Publishing, taking readers beyond the unexplained.
Welcome back to the show. I'm still joined by my guest, Neale Donald Walsch. Now, Neale, I've met a lot of people who say that, there's no science to say that God exists. But from what you've just described there before the ad break, God is more than consciousness. God is us. God is everything, I suppose. The word God has a lot of bad history, doesn't it?
That would be putting it mildly. That would be the understatement of the century. We've given God a bad rap, but it's understandable. It hasn't been done, out of anger or in order to try to fool somebody. There's a lot of thought out there that religion is this plot to somehow control humanity. I think that there are some people who use religion in that way, as they use politics in that way, and perhaps every aspect of human life in that way, but not the vast majority. By no means the vast majority. In fact, just the opposite. The vast majority of people would never use religion as a means of trying to control another person. But it's understandable how God's got such a bad rap. We have misunderstood the nature of God, the nature of divinity from the beginning. We've not been able to fully comprehend who and what God is, because no one has been able to come along and share with us with clarity, in fact, who and what God is. And from the very earliest days, when we realized there was something else, we imagined that we were separate from that something else. That began in the days of the caveman, and lightning would strike, or the rainstorm would come, or something would occur, weather, or an earthquake, or a tornado, or something would occur, and we were sitting around the campfire, in the early days, and we'd say to somebody across the campfire, which meant, "Did you do that? Did you do that?" And the other guy would go, "Whoa. No, I didn't do that." Well, if you didn't do that and I didn't do that, then who did that? Who did that? Which gave us the first notion of, there's something else. It's neither you nor me, nor the guy at the next campfire, nor anybody in the clan or in the group, or anybody that we know. There must be something or somebody else. And furthermore, it's somebody or something else that we can't control, that does these things seemingly outside of our ability to control it. And so then the great effort was to figure out what that something else was, what makes that happen, the lightning in the sky, what made that happen? And then, is there any way we can control it? Is there any way that we can have any degree of control over it at all? So we decided to see if we could do a thing called appease, the weather gods, or the fertility gods, or the gods of the harvest, or however many gods we thought there were at one time in the universe. Then we began to reduce it down to only a single god, and then we decided how can we somehow appease the single god. But that's how religion came to pass, and the idea that we had to somehow appease this God that we imagine exists, who needs something from us, is how God got a bad rap. But it wasn't done in any kind of nefarious way. Nobody was attempting to do anything bad. It just is the mark of a emerging species. So I would say this to you, Kevin. What you're seeing really is the faulting, very early steps of a species of sentient beings, namely human beings. The very faulty first steps of a very youthful young species, just barely born, trying to understand what's really going on. Humanity is a very young species in comparison to as I'm sure you can imagine, in comparison to the age of the universe. We're talking about a species that's been here for a very short period of time. There are other species in this universe, I might add, who have been here a lot longer than we have, who understand that we are babies, children. And so, yeah, the God of our understanding has gotten kind of a bad rap, but not because anyone wanted to do it that way for some negative reason or purpose, but largely because we're children and simply don't understand what's totally true.
Now, Neale, just before the ad break, I wanted to talk about truths in a sense, and my sort of spiritual wake-up process was, when I would ask myself those questions, what was there before the universe? Am I more than my body? And that sort of led me to read many sort of different spiritual books in a sense. I mean, all books act as a sort of roadmap to the same place in one sense. But obviously, you've had a large following with your books. Why should people, read your books and sort of say, well, these books are the truth?
They should not take my books as truth. If I find anybody who takes my book and swallows it whole as if it were true, I'll give them such a rap. Right? Wow! Don't do that. The books themselves say that. The books actually say, do not believe a word that's in here. If you believe anything that's in these books, then you've misunderstood the point of the books themselves. For the books say, do not believe this. Rather, explore it. Sure enough, explore it. Examine it. Take a look at it. See if it's true for you. It's a proposal. The messages in Conversations with God are a proposal. And we get to step into it and see if it makes sense in our world, in our experience, in our reality. If it does, we call it true. If it doesn't, we say it's not true. Incidentally, truth itself does not exist. There's no such thing as objective truth. All truth is subjective. That is, like beauty, truth is in the eye of the beholder. So a person should not take my books and embrace them and accept them as if they were true. Absolutely not. But I would encourage people to take a look at it and see if anything they're reading in my book might resonate with their own experience, their own observation, their own awareness, and their own newly expanded consciousness. I would go one step further. I would say that a person's newly expanded consciousness will attract them to materials such as conversations with God. Because as we become more conscious of what is ultimately true for us, we become more aware of those elements of our experience which confirm our inner reality. It's like buying a new car. A few years ago, I bought a Prius. It was a beautiful, shiny black Prius. I could have gotten red or blue or silver or white, but I wanted to get a black one. I didn't see a lot of black Priuses around, and I wanted to be unusual and different. So I called it my little Batmobile, my little black Prius. I was so proud of it the first day I had it. But the second day I had it, 2 days after I bought it, everybody in my town had a black Prius. Well, maybe not everybody, but every fourth person, they were all over town. It was amazing how many black Priuses that dealership sold in just 48 hours. Or is it possible, in fact, that all those black Priuses existed and were there all the time, but simply revealed themselves to me? I became aware of their presence because I was much more observant with regard to the reality of black Priuses because I now had one. In much the same way, people are attracted to my books, because their consciousness about what's true globally in their reality is confirmed by the presence of the material they find between the covers of what I write. So no, don't believe a word I write. But if part of it resonates with you, then move into the full expression and the experience of that, and allow yourself to notice that, like everything else in your reality, you created that as well.
You know, I meet a lot of religious people, and there's a good portion of them that I come across who would never read any other book except for their, religious book that's centered around their beliefs. So they never sort of get to explore different ideas. Do you think that's a safe thing to do, to just, only sort of read one books rather than expanding their knowledge and looking at other spiritual truths as well?
Well, that's like asking me if I think it's wise to sample all the women on the planet rather than the one that I'm most interested in. It might be fun, might be enjoyable. It might also be very tiring and in some ways depleting, but I'm not sure it would serve the moment. When you ask me a question that large, would it be wise to sample all of the world's literatures and sacred texts and the world's religions? I don't know what wisdom is. Wisdom is, I don't know, wisdom is as wisdom does, I guess. I have no idea what would be wise, but I do know what's functional, what's workable. What's workable is that when you find the lady of your choice, in my case, since I'm heterosexual, when you find the partner of your choice, that's it. You stop right there. You don't start looking around, keep on looking around the party to see if anybody else is prettier or nicer or better. So I don't know that it's necessary for a person to examine and explore all of the world's known religious texts. By the way, that would take you a lifetime or two in any event, in order to be an expert on what serves you and feels good to you. No, my own personal recommendation is, if you find, and by the way, it could be Roman Catholicism, could be Judaism, could be Buddhism, could be any one of the isms that are out there right now. It doesn't have to be something other than that. If I meet a person who's Roman Catholic and having a wonderful life and happy much more often than they're not and totally at peace with themselves and with God, God bless them. Be a Roman Catholic. Be a practicing Roman Catholic. Go for it. Do it. I never try to talk anybody out of any particular belief system or thought or idea or philosophy. But is it necessary to examine all the philosophies in order to know whether one suits you or fits you? No. It's only necessary to know whether the one that you're looking at right now suits you or fits you. I went into a clothing store about 2 years ago and I put a suit on. Amazingly enough, it fit me perfectly right off the rack. That doesn't happen very often, but this one just happened to fall right on my body. The guy said, "This is amazing. Look at this. No tailoring required." I said, "I'll take it." He said, "Don't you want to look at the other suits? You got about 600 of them over here. Come on, let's look at all 600. I said, "No, I don't think I want to look at all 600. I'm already wearing one that fits perfectly. Thank you very much."
But in your book, What God Wants, you make it quite clear in that book that God wants nothing. But if that's the case, it's basically saying that all the religions out there, they're either, misled or they're wrong.
No, right and wrong don't even exist. I'm not even sure I know what you're talking about here. Right and wrong don't even exist. Right and wrong are figments of the human imagination. There's no such thing as right and wrong. There's only what works and what does not work, given what it is we're trying to do. With regard to the religions themselves, let me make something very, very clear. I don't make the assertion, nor would I ever make the statement, that any religion is wrong. I would suggest that there are some belief systems, some of which call themselves religions, that are incomplete, that are not expressions of the truth in fullness. So here's what I observe, Kevin. I observe that with regard to religion, many people are like children who have learned to add and subtract, but have not learned to multiply or divide. They've not yet learned their multiplication tables, but they do know how to add and subtract. And they think that's all there is to know about mathematics. Now, that doesn't make adding and subtracting wrong. It's perfectly right. But it does make it incomplete. It's not all there is to know on that subject. So with regard to religion, I think that sometimes people embrace a thought system, embrace an entire theological construction that we call a religion, and then they imagine that's the whole of it. That is, that's all of it, that there's nothing more to know on this subject. I think that would be a mistake. From my observation, that could be an error, because there may be more to know on this subject. I would ask two questions of humanity when I discuss things like this. The first question I ask people is this: how is it possible for 6.9 billion people on this planet to all want the same thing and be unable to get it? How can that happen? How can we have 7 billion people hankering after the same stuff in general? Peace, prosperity, security, understanding, opportunity, love, safety, all the things we all want. Nobody wants anything different in the end. We all want the same stuff. How can we have 7 billion people searching for the same things, calling themselves an evolved species, and be singularly unable to get it? Question number 2. Do you suppose it's possible that there's something we don't fully understand here? The understanding of which would change everything?
Okay, Neale, but is it simple enough just to want happiness in life?
Everybody wants happiness. How are we doing creating it? That's the point I just made. That's the point I just made, Kevin. Everybody wants happiness. How is it possible for all of us to want happiness, for all of us to have wanted happiness for thousands and thousands of years? If this were a science experiment, Kevin, we'd have thrown out the whole experiment years ago, centuries ago, millennia ago, based on the outcome. We would have said, well, we're obviously doing something wrong here. But this is not a science experiment, it's life itself. And a thinking person would have to ask themselves, after trying to find happiness for thousands and thousands of years, do you think it's possible that there's something we don't fully understand here yet? About life? About God? About ourselves? About the point of all of this? Is it possible that there's some key piece of data missing? the understanding of which would change everything? And the answer is patently obvious. Of course there must be. But the arrogance of humanity and certain portions of humanity is the idea that no, there's nothing, we understand all of it. It's all right here in the book, Neale. Just read the book. It's all right here in the book. Do what the book says, you'll be happy. Well, to quote an American television personality named Dr. Phil, how's that working for you?
Okay, but I suppose the one thing after reading your book as well, which really hit the nail on the head for me, was when you talk about the incompleteness of religion, as you call it. The idea of thinking that we just can't seem to get on. There's nothing really in any religion that seems to sort of bond us together as family, from coming from that space of oneness. So the idea that we're all one, what would you say to that?
I'm saying to you, Kevin, that the body of human knowledge in every area is incomplete, not just in religion. The body of human knowledge in every area, including religion, is incomplete. But here's the difference. In the other areas of human endeavor, we're willing to admit it. We understand in science that there's still stuff out there we don't know. We understand in our technologies that there's still stuff out there we don't know. We understand in medicine that there's still stuff out there that we don't know. But in the area of religion, many people, far too many people, millions of people, are unwilling to make the same assertion. They're unwilling to say, you know what, there's still stuff out there that we don't know. No, rather they say, we know all there is to know. It's right there in the book. Just read the book. It's in the good book, which is, of course, the Quran. I'm sorry, I mean the Bhagavad Gita. I'm sorry, I mean the Book of Mormon, the Talmud, the New Testament, the something. It's in one of those books. I think, I hope, it's in one of those books. But if you pick up the wrong book, woe be unto you, because you're going straight to hell. And here's something else that I noticed, Kevin, about how we approach the whole body of knowledge in life. People who are working in the areas of science, in the areas of technology, in the areas of medicine, are willing to do something that people who are working in the area of religion are not willing to do. In science, in technology, in medicine, we're willing to question the prior assumption. See, as soon as a scientist makes a discovery, he questions the discovery. He questions his own discovery. The same is true in technology. The same is true in medicine, which is why we have made extraordinary, breathtaking advances in those areas of human endeavor and interaction. But in religion, you're not allowed to question the prior assumption. The prior assumption was made hundreds, if not thousands of years ago, and that is the prior assumption. And to question the prior assumption is blasphemy. It's heresy. It's apostasy. It's punishable in some cases by death. And so, it will be the death of us.
Right. So the answer to this, as I've read it in your books, and it makes sense to me. It resonates to me. It's just to apply oneness. If we applied oneness to this, as we're all from the same source, we're all brothers and sisters, would this not solve a problem in a generation?
Yes, in overnight, actually. Forget about the generation. In 24 hours. And we're more than even, to speak poetically, we're more than even brothers and sisters. We are, in fact, the same thing. That is, you are an extension of me, I am an extension of you. We are extensions of each other, even as the fingers of my hand are an extension of our body. And they're all part of the same hand. They're not different from the hand, but they are different from each other as parts of the hand. So we are all part of the body of God, emergent aspects of divinity. But we are not so much brothers and sisters, to speak metaphorically, as we are the differing expressions of the self-same thing. Therefore, we don't feel toward another as we would feel toward our brother or our sister. but actually as we would feel toward ourselves, which is even closer than we would feel toward our brother and sister. So I need to notice that when I'm looking at other people, I'm looking in the mirror.
And just to embrace that, just for one day, it would make, as you would agree, a major difference in the way we get on with one another.
It would make an enormous difference. But that's why nobody in positions of influence, no centers of influence on this planet, will announce or declare or assert the oneness of humanity. The Pope will not do it. The Archbishop of Canterbury will not do it. The President of the United States will not do it. The Chairman of the Board of the world's great corporations will not do it. People in positions of power and authority will not make the assertion that you have just noticed could change everything overnight, for the simple reason that it would, in fact, change everything overnight. And people in positions of power and authority and the institutions from which they emerge and which they continue to co-create necessarily must resist things changing overnight, or they would cease to exist in their present form. So there's a vested interest here working against the notion of our oneness. But Conversations with God made it very clear. There are 15 words that could change humanity's understanding. A single new gospel that would alter our entire reality on earth, literally overnight. It's a 2-sentence new gospel. It goes like this: we are all one. Ours is not a better way. Ours is merely another way. Can you imagine, Kevin, the Pope saying that? Oh, ours is not a better way. Ours is merely another way. Can you imagine the candidates in the present race for the presidency of the United States saying that to each other? Oh, ours is not a better way. Ours is merely another way. Can you imagine people who are in this place of division from each other, imagining that they somehow hold the answer to everything, saying to each other, ours is not a better way. Ours is merely another way. I say that to you. People ask me all the time, is Conversations with God and the message that emerges from it a better way? My answer is always the same. No, it's not a better way. It's merely another way. But if it works for you, use it. Embrace it. So what humanity needs right now is a new gospel. A new, not just religious gospel, but a new political gospel, a new economic gospel, a new social construction, a new larger understanding about all of it. The entire body of knowledge of humanity can revolve around this simple brand new gospel. We are all one. Ours is not a better way. Ours is merely another way. By the way, there's no way not to get where we're going, incidentally.
And Neale, I mean, how can people watching this now individually make that change for oneness, or go to introducing that principle, into their daily living?
By simply acting in a way that demonstrates their sense of oneness, oneness with all of life, and with every other person in life. That's easier said than done, of course. I mean, I don't do it, and I don't know very many people who do it. But I know people who are trying, who are efforting, who are on that path. And I'm one of those, for sure. And how that shows up in life is to be understanding. For instance, let me just give you one example. I have all kinds of people in my life who I think have done me wrong, and who are doing me wrong right now, this minute, right now. I could give you a list of folks who are doing me wrong, or have failed me in some way, or let me down, or whatever I think that is not okay with me about them and what they're doing. So if I think I'm one with that person, the first thing I would do is look inside of myself, this particular expression of them, and say, has this particular expression ever experienced what they're experiencing right now? That is, have I ever let anybody else down? Have I ever not told the truth? Have I ever disappointed another? Have I ever flown off the handle and become angry? Have I ever resented another? Have I ever acted in any way like that? So here's, to answer your question, what I say to people. It's just so simple, by the way. We've been told this since we were 5 years old. Put yourself in the other person's shoes. If you can say with absolute clarity that you've never walked in that pathway, that you've never done anything like what that person is now doing, then maybe there's a tiny space for some judgment on your part and for some feeling of superiority. But I'll tell you what, I haven't found anybody who's ever done anything to me or with me or around me that I disapproved of that I haven't done to somebody else. So I'm an older person, of course. You know, I can say this because I'm now nearing 70, and I'm so old so soon and so smart so late. Wouldn't it have been nice if I kind of understood this when I was 41 or 33 or 29? But here I am approaching 70, and it's suddenly dawning on me, wow, I've done every one of these things and more. So where is the place inside of me that can look at that other person and say, I understand. I understand how the human condition could have caused this experience to become part of your reality. And I'll be the last person to judge you for it.
Right, well, my final question, Neale, that has been quoted a number of times in a number of places right now. You talk a lot about oneness, but is it just as important to be in the now?
It's absolutely unimportant to be in the now. I would never suggest it. It's a ridiculous idea. It's totally stupid, and I don't want anyone to even think about that. Of course it's important to be in the now. I like to answer obvious questions with a little bit of humor. Certainly. Of course it's important to be in the now. Because you know why? Now is all there is. There is nothing else but now. Now it's now. It's right now. It's right now. It's not yester moment, and it's not tomorrow, where life is happening. So our opportunity, our challenge, our invitation from life is to get out of yester moment and stay away from tomorrow, and in fact allow ourselves to, as Ram Dass deliciously put it, be here now. And here's something we understand fascinatingly, Kevin, about being here now. In almost every instance, when we are here right now, just right here, right now, not in even one moment behind us or one moment ahead of us, but right now, we almost always conclude that right now, we have everything we need to be perfectly happy. Right now, nothing more is wanted or needed for us to know contentment, peace, okayness, happiness, and all the good stuff we're searching for. It may not be this way in 5 minutes. I got a train to catch. And it certainly wasn't this way yesterday when I had that headache, but right now, see. So we discover when we experience the wonder of now, or as my lovely friend Eckhart Tolle called it, the power of now, we discover that in most of our nows, things are pretty okay.
Well, Neale Donald Walsch, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome, Kevin. It was nice to be with you now.
Well, we've come to an end on today's show. Don't forget that you can listen and watch all our past interviews on The More Show's official YouTube channel. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new daily shows. You may also find out more on all past and upcoming guests on the show via themoreshow.co.uk, and do like us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates. So until next time, be safe.
The More Show is supported by Mindscape, Paranormal and UFO Matrix magazines. Available for download on all major digital platforms.
Visit themoreshow.co.uk/shop to purchase products and services from your favourite past guests. If you're new to this site, you can also catch up on the previous television and radio shows through YouTube and the More Show website.
The More Show is in partnership with Ozark Mountain Publishing, taking readers beyond the unexplained.